Good morning and a good week to everyone. Today is the 15th day of Sivan, the 4th of June, and we're up to Parashat BeHa'alotcha in America. In Chutz La'aretz, in Israel, we're already reading Parashat Shlach, but we're going to focus on BeHa'alotcha. We'll start with the first reading. The parsha is called BeHa'alotcha because that means when you raise the candles, or rather, when you make them ascend or kindle them. So the very famous saying is that when Aaron comes into the sanctuary to light the candles, which here is called to ascend them, to kindle them, they should all shine toward the middle, the central shaft of the menorah. And most importantly, the next verse says, that not the next verse, but rather on this verse itself, Rashi says that what does it mean to light them? It means that the flame should go up by itself. There should be an inertia from the flame itself. Now, this became a very, very important image, that the flame should light or rise by itself. It shouldn't need help. And this is a very strange idea if you think about it. What do you mean? Is there a flame that doesn't rise by itself? Is there any such thing where you would light a flame and somehow you'd have to push it up? There's no such thing. So really, literally the meaning is that the candles should be ready, the wicks should be ready with oil, so that they start right away pulling new oil up. It means that the wick itself has to be immersed in oil. If you light a Hanukkah menorah with oil, then you know this, that the only way to really get it to work is to dip the entire wick inside the oil before you light it. So it has to be already saturated with oil. So that's the literal meaning. But the deeper meaning here is that the flame should rise by itself is actually what we call the experience of things happening. In other words, the menorah is a tremendous vessel for feeling that everything that we're doing in life is happening by itself, not through our action. Now, you can't start this way. When you start doing something, you have to feel that, well, not just feel, you have to actually go and do something, right? You can't just hope for things to happen by themselves. But once you've accomplished something, then the menorah is a tremendous article of meditation to feel that what you've accomplished is actually happening by itself. The flame is rising by itself. It's not you who's doing it. And this is one of the reasons that when many holy people, they light the menorah on or the candelabra on Hanukkah, they take a very, very long time, because their meditation is such that they want to feel that it's actually God who's lighting the menorah, not them. They want to cancel themselves out of the equation. So it takes a long time. So this became a very important article of meditation and contemplation and Hasidic thought and Kabbalistic thought also, of this menorah where the flame is rising as it were by itself. Again, every flame rises by itself, but here the image is one that's supposed to awaken in me the feeling that it's not me who's doing it, that it's everything that I'm doing, everything that I'm accomplishing is happening by itself, as it were, and not because of what I've done. The second part of the first reading begins with the initiation of the Levites. And I'll just read a few verses. God spoke to Moses saying, "Encourage the Levites or rather separate them from the rest of the Israelites by purifying them. How do you purify them? This is what you must do to them to purify them. Sprinkle them with purification water. This was water that had the ashes of the red heifer sprinkled on it, and that was used to purify anyone from any kind of defilement. But then they have a very special part of their purification that says, have them shave all their skin with a razor. This is an incredible idea. I mean, usually this is forbidden in Torah. One is not allowed to shave all of one's body. So here too, there are certain parts, the genitals and the armpits, they didn't shave. But they shaved everything else. And again, this is normally not permitted. So what is this whole story with shaving? Where did this even come from? So what Rashi writes, and this is a well-known idea, is that the other person who's commanded to shave himself entirely is the person who has leprosy. And that we saw a couple of months ago when we read Tazria and Metzora. And he too shaves his entire body. But it's important to know what the hair represents in order to understand this. So the thinking in Jewish mysticism or in Zohar and Kabbalah is that the hairs represent the contraction or almost like the fitting into a small space of what was inside the body. So the hair on the head comes from the brain. That's the understanding. What causes the head hair to grow is that a person has thoughts that are not needed. They're useless thoughts. You can think about this. I mean, people who have a full head of hair, the idea here is that they have a lot of useless thoughts. What is a useless thought? So it usually is explained that a useless thought is when a person worries too much about their livelihood. So we would think that would, I mean, our common sense would say that you would become bald from that. But actually the people who are bald are considered to be those who conserve their energy in their mind. And they only use it for good things. So this is a great thing to tell anyone who's bald, including myself, that when you grow bald very early on, it's because you've been conserving your brain energy and making sure that you don't waste it on anything useless. But that's only part of the story. It's not a joke. It really is taken seriously, but not in the sense of that if you have useless thoughts or you don't have useless thoughts, that changes your genetics and whether you have hair or don't have hair on your head. You know that even people who are bald have hair on their head, almost as much as anyone who has a lot of hair. It's just that the hair doesn't grow very well. So what you see is little tiny, almost like this very fine covering that's very close to the skin. So there's always hair. It's not that there's not hair. It's just a question whether you can see it or not. So getting back to the idea that hair is considered to be the contraction. It's a form of might. It's a form of what we call gevura. There's a story that's told in the time of the Baal Shem Tov that something like this happened. That there was a king this happened from time to time then, who wanted to evacuate all the Jews from his country. And the Jews were in a terrible state. And so the one who was guiding the community for that month, they took turns depending on how much money you gave to the communal treasury. So the person who was there that month when this edict came out, he said like this: all the problems that Jews have are because of the Torah. Why? Because they don't keep the Torah. If we would keep everything, we wouldn't have any problems. So since we can't keep everything, so the real solution is not to have us do something we can't do, but rather to, as it were, shun the Torah. Put the Torah in excommunication, as they call it. We don't want to do what Moshe Rabbeinu said anymore. We don't want this covenant, because it gets us so much trouble, because we can never keep it well enough. So that's what they wanted to do. And then a poor man came and said, don't make this cherem, don't make this excommunication of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Torah. Instead, because Moshe is true and his Torah is true, it's not going to help you. But instead I'll find a different way to cancel this edict. He came to the king and he said, you should be afraid. If you evacuate, if you expel the Jews from your state, I will make sure, he says, that your entire body will be covered by long hair, that as much as all your barbers will try, they will never be able to completely get rid of it. It will just keep growing and growing and growing. And indeed, at that moment, the man's hair, this king's hair, started to grow. And they called all the barbers, and nobody could get rid of the hair. So, first of all, what is this? Even this image is that when you have might, when you treat people harshly, that causes, as it were, the image is that the hair grows. So the whole idea was that because of this edict that he had done against the Jews, now he's going to be full with hair. And the same thing was true about the Levites. The Levites themselves are considered to be might. They're from the left side. But in order to be instilled into their special position in the temple, they had to have their hair removed. In other words, the type of might that they had before, which may have been useful for other things. Again, it could be, like we said before, the might that a person puts into thinking about their livelihood, into things that are useless in a certain sense. They don't really add anything to life, because your livelihood is insured from God anyway. So that needed to be removed completely from their entire skin, and they needed to grow new hair. And this new hair would be the product of the worries that they now had, the gvura, the might. Might, again, is like worries or the harshness that comes from worrying and being sensitive to the tabernacle. Being sensitive, first of all, that no one should walk in who doesn't belong there. And also being sensitive when you carry the vessels, when you carry the tabernacle itself, to make sure that nothing is dropped and nothing is broken. And that type of sensitivity is what we call fear of heaven. That is also related to hair, but the idea here was, again, to get rid of the extraneous fears that they had, the extraneous forms of anxiety that they had, and to replace them with the right anxiety. By the way, it is not completely without credit to argue that a person who suffers from anxieties, who suffers from fears that are unwarranted, from phobias, that one of the ways maybe to be able to help them is by indeed getting permission to remove all the hair from the entire body, except for from the genitals and the under the armpits, and then to let the hair regrow. The point here is not to not have hair. The point is to have hair which symbolizes the true fear, the correct fear that a person needs to have in his life, fears that build life, construct life, and make us sensitive to the right things, and not the things that cause the phobias or the fears or whatever they were. So we'll end with this today, and God willing, I'll see you all tomorrow.
Boy, thank you. That was